Oh, wasn't that exciting? We're live. Thank you for coming. I'm John. This is the TSG live call-in talk show. And you know now from the hints that I dropped, which weren't very subtle, that our special guest today is James Wright. You know him as JLWII2000 here on YouTube. He's been doing product reviews and other stuff, live streams with manufacturers, that kind of thing, for a number of years now. And between him and me combined, I think we have over 1,000 product reviews or spotlights or demos or whatever you want to call them put out there, videos. So it might be I don't know that you're going to find a show with two people that have seen that many models or evaluated that many models or been in the process of evaluating that many models, maybe ever. So it should be fun. You're invited to call in. We're going to have the link showing up in the live chat every so often. It's also in the description of the video, so you can call in using that link. If you call in, you want to participate, be sure that your webcam is on. Be sure that your microphone is working, that you're calling from a quiet place, and that you have your browser window that has YouTube playing either muted or closed. Because if you don't do that, it will create a loop that makes it very hard to talk, and you'll just get cut off. Also, know what you want to talk about before you call in, because that helps us get people on and off the stream quicker. And I'd like to be able to get people on and off as quickly as possible so that we have a chance for everybody to talk and ask questions. So the format really is that James is going to be the co-host here, and you're welcome to call in and ask him questions, or you can ask me questions, or just comments. You know, we're going to be asking you some questions too. So it should be fun. With that, let me bring James in. And there he is. James, welcome. And thank you for taking the time to be with us today.
Hey, how you doing, John?
Okay, so far, I think. How about you? You're looking like you're pretty relaxed there today.
Yeah, it's been a busy day, but it's been a rewarding day work-wise. So pretty happy to be wrapping up this week. It's been a busy week. And tomorrow's Friday, which is my favorite day of the week. The weekday anyway. The weekends are always amazing, but
yeah, weekends are more favorite for me, especially when I was doing the Monday through Friday drag.
yeah, it's something I didn't know if I would want to go back to, but I got insanely bored very quickly. So I figured if I'm going to take a job, it's going to be a Monday through Friday job. So
right, yeah, we had that conversation a few months ago, I think, when you were kind of looking and getting ready to move. And I remember you told me that you didn't want to have your weekends taken up by work. Totally understandable.
Yep.
I really support what you're doing in terms of putting your family needs first. I worked a job that was weekends and 60 plus hours some weeks, and for 10 years I did that, and it was nice because I made a pretty good amount of money at the time, but I had no life. And I missed out on 10 years of my kids' lives. So you're doing the right thing.
Yeah, we had our kids a little later in life. I still had one deployment with my oldest one where I missed about 3 months of his growing up. But my wife sent me pictures every day, which was cool. But yeah, it really makes you focus on, what's important by realizing, man, I'm losing a lot of time. So it was methodical to have our children later, to make rank really fast in the military, so I had more of a at-home job. And then to, once I retired, go to find something that wasn't going to, do it all over again, basically, when my kids are 7 and 9. So,
right.
Yep.
Very cool. Well, as a co-host, you're welcome to direct the conversation any way you'd like to. If there was any questions that you had for me, I don't think there are, since we've talked before, but if there are, you're welcome to ask them too. And
my biggest one is, what's it like having hair?
It's warmer. It's warmer on top of your head. I've never been bald. Maybe as a baby. I don't really remember that though. But I'm guessing that you can probably run faster if you don't have hair because there's not as much resistance,
Yeah.
from the aerodynamics.
Well, I was never a fast runner. The
Oh.
Air Force fitness test, I'd pass within margins pretty fairly, but I was never at the beginning of the pack.
Well, the question is if you would pass now, and I think we both know the answer.
Not happening.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's okay though. You're retired, so you don't have to worry about that anymore.
Yeah. Hopefully I get my smaller waistline back one of these days. But right now it's a matter of retirement ease plus a couple medical things I got to get squared away, and then hopefully maybe you'll see me thin out a little bit.
Right. Oh, there's a question for you. What happens? What happens when? Oh, I lost it. I lost my question.
Here.
It had to do with. Oh boy, I'm such a great host. I just had a total brain fart.
Oh, I thought it was on the questions list that came up.
No, but just for the viewers, we were both on Sparky 107's show yesterday.
Yeah.
He called me up or texted me about an hour before that show saying, "Hey, would you help me out? Because I don't want to do this alone," or something like that. He wanted help because it's a lot easier if you have two people trying to deal with all the questions that are coming up on the chat and all that stuff. And and I mean, I've called him the same way to have him help me with stuff. So I didn't even know we were going to be on. And yesterday during that show, there were a bunch of questions that got asked in the chat that we never got to because we kind of just ran out of time. So I might ask you some of those questions today, just in case.
I've got a feed coming up of questions I see on my phone. I've got muted, but I bet you were going to ask what happens if you fail a fitness test in the military. It sounded like that's what you're going to ask, but maybe not. I don't know.
No, I think that was it, because what does happen? They don't kick you out, do they? Or you just have to go on a...
No, so in my 20 years, I never failed one. But at the end of my career, I messed up my back pretty bad, and I was down to just push-ups, sit-ups, and a waist measurement. And the waist measurement's around your belly button, so it's really not waist. And so I never failed one, but obviously I was in a senior leadership position where I had to deal with people that did. And if you fail one, they make you go to a class and they make you retest in 3 months. If you fail two, you get, like, it starts going on the record in your file, and then they make you do another class and test you in 3 months. If you fail three, they can kick you out, and if you fail four, you are kicked out. So if for some reason somebody wanted to gain, I don't know, say 40 pounds in a year, like I did, but do it during the time they were in the military, they would actually could go from a completely perfect career to kicked out in a year, because every 3 months, you take 4 tests in 3 months in a year at a 3-month pace if you keep failing them. So
right. And they're not really the kind of tests you can study for.
Right. And, I was eating, like I explained off camera, I was eating my emotions the last couple of years because there was some pretty serious stuff, not against me or anything, but some serious stuff going on. So that didn't help. And then they don't test you for the last year, which doesn't help. And then I've got a little bit of a thyroid issue, but it ain't all this poundage. So.
Well, I mean, you take a lot of times when people are going through stuff, they take comfort in eating. I think everybody goes through that at some point. So
yep.
I remembered what the question really was. The question was, if you have your old clothes that fit when you were in shape, thinking that you're going to wear them someday, like, are you in that stage of denial, or are you just like, nope, got rid of that stuff?
Well, what happens is I've gotten a little chubby over the years and gotten back down. So I am in a stage of denial, but I did let go. I sent to my younger brother, and as a warning more than anything, like my 32-inch jeans and my just medium and large shirts that, I haven't fit in years. And he's starting to thicken out because there's a little bit of heredity involved, but he's starting to thick out. And I'm like, hey, dude, this is a warning. So these clothes you can fit now, I fit into about 10 years ago. So, I mean, if you go back and look at my first video, I look like a bobblehead because I'm just, there's no neck. I threatened to rough somebody up. I don't even know how they took me seriously because I was so thin.
I don't know. Maybe they just thought you're, hardcore, looked like an MMA guy. Because there's some skinny MMA guys too, right?
Yeah, but I was just like, I don't know.
Kung fu expert. Kung fu expert, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, I did the math. If I can get get on the medication I need to, and then even without that, just knock it off down to about a stupid low calorie amount, I could be back to where I was by the train show next year, national train show, easily. So, that's kind of a goal, but we'll see if it happens. It's been like, oh, I'm going to start on Monday, and then next Monday, and then after Thanksgiving, and after Christmas. It's like, when's it going to kick in? But it's really simple to do. I just need to get in the mode and on the horse.
Yeah. I mean, well, that's what New Year's resolutions are for too, right? So
those have never worked for me. I've always ended up like starting on odd day and just taking months and getting back to it. So
yeah, I think for most people, I think that activity level is really what helps most. Activity level and really limiting the types of stuff that you eat are like the two keys.
Yeah, there was a job I got offered with Pepsi. They were actually going to create the position for me, but they said it was going to be a butt kicker, like 11-hour days, Tuesday through Saturday. Well, that violated my weekend rule, but I really had to think about it because I'm like, that'll get me back in shape by itself. And it was like 2 times the pay of what I'm getting now. It was an absurd amount of money for what it was, but right. I just couldn't do the Saturday thing. I'm like, and it was, what was it, 11 to 7, I think? Or no, what do you say? Oh, 7 a.m. to like 5 p.m. But he said you can pretty much guarantee you're going to work 11 hours a day. So that would put 7 to 6. And once COVID goes away, my kids' programs are at like 5:30, 6 o'clock. So I would never make those. It was a 35, 40-minute drive.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. So it was back to that process again, thinking about that, more. So.
Right. Guess what? We have our first caller trying to call in.
Okay.
I recognize this person. This is going to be a trivia question someday. And it was, who was the first person that I ever had on a co-hosted live call-in show? Do you know the answer?
Abraham Lincoln.
You're about to find out. There she is. Hi, Michelle.
Hey, how are you guys?
Good. How are you
doing? Good.
I think we're good. Do you have a question for one of us or both of us, or?
Well, I was just going to tell James that I think it's super cool that you chose your family time with your kids to change your career for. Yeah, and I think that's really important. That family comes first always. So.
Yeah. I don't want to be the guy that's figuring that out on my deathbed. So
right.
I had a little help in the process just by being deployed when my kid was a baby and stuff like that. Kind of come to that realization. But yeah, that's how I'm going to do life.
I think that's a good way to be.
Yeah. A friend of mine, Dave Falkenberg, has a job at one of the high-tech companies. I don't know if you may have heard of him. He's been around and been involved. He does N-scale stuff, but he has a story that he tells about working so much and so hard that he got to go to his son's birthday party one year, and he thought it was his son's 3rd birthday. It was actually his son's 4th birthday, and he couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
Like he lost track that much. So that's a kind of an extreme sort of example, but it can happen. So
yeah, that's not, I respect the people that have to do it. It's just, if you don't have to, you got to consider, what you're missing out on. It's not something you can ever get back.
No.
So
true.
I'm proud of your health journey too. I realized during quarantine that I was in terrible shape because we were actually spending time outside and I was trying to hike and wasn't going well. So I actually started walking like every day back in June. And it's amazing the difference it made.
Yeah. So. Yeah, I go on walks with my family, but it's just, I have this problem with eating in the evening. I'm good up until like 5 p.m. If we cut the day off at 5, I'd weigh about 160 pounds. But yeah, it's just that, a little bit of health problems, but I'm not going to be one of those people that's like, oh, it's just my thyroid. No, it's thyroid and cookies and stuff. So, yeah, it's just one other thing about the family thing is I didn't think I'd ever get a job because I was saying in the interview process, at least the second stages of the interviews, that, hey, I'm not willing to work on weekends, maybe 1 or 2 a year. And I'm not willing to stay late, like maybe once in a blue moon. So my wife's like, you're never going to get a job. But these guys, the hospital was like, well, as long as you have your work done. I was like, oh, I'll have my work done. Well, there's 60 tasks. I was like, well, one thing I am is a good time manager. They'll get done. And I've walked out of that place every day on the dot. Matter of fact, the boss now waits for me to walk out on security camera because he's got all the security camera feeds in his office to know when it's time to go home. So,
that's funny. They're setting their clock according to your schedule.
Yeah.
So, I have a question for James. I actually do have a question. So, okay, now that you've moved and you're starting this whole new part of your life, what are you going to model? I know you review everything, but what do you want to model? Like what railroad and what are you going to do?
Yeah, so as you can see behind me, Dave's going to laugh because I still don't have the directional thing down from last night. I am still not in the place yet. We're looking at one on Saturday. I want to base it off of how much space I have. My ideal space would be 40 foot by 25 feet of a large area in a basement, but I've seen that one time in all of the homes I've looked at, and it was too early to pull the trigger at that time. So if I get that space or close to it, I'd like a UP, kind of a freelance railroad. It's going to be UP primarily. I'd like Cheyenne. I bought a book actually from the Cheyenne Museum about all of the history of the Cheyenne shops, roundhouse, and then I've got a lot of aerial photography and some personal drone footage. I'd like to replicate the Cheyenne shops, even if I have to scale it down a little bit, because I was doing the math on Google Earth, and if I do it to full scale, it was going to be like 20 feet wide and like 36 feet long or something insane. But I'd like to factor that into the layout and then just freelance and then run NS and CSX because that's what's down here now, but run still primarily UP, and just kind of do a little bit of rotation of the rolling stock and locomotives I have in and out of the boxes. I have a different thing even on my last layout. I'd have a different thing on my layout, at least on the main lines, probably 2 or 3 times a month. So
I'm having to mute and unmute you, Michelle, because we're getting that weird noise.
Oh, shoot. I'm sorry. And I'll get off here. I like your answer. Oh. It's a good choice. I've seen the entire Cheyenne yard done in N scale, and it was massive in N scale. So it's like 6 by 12.
Yeah. And everybody's got a pipe dream. I'm sure it's going to fall short somewhere, but that would be ideal. And maybe we luck into something because now we're about to get into the busy season. That's why I'm afraid to, even if I like this home, it needs a lot of renovation. I'm afraid to pull the trigger because, there's a lot better stuff that should be on the cusp, but you never know with COVID. It's a weird thing, people are sitting on a lot of equity and they're just not moving.
I'll unmute. Okay. Well, that's all I have. I just was going to ask you that question. What are you going to model, James?
Yeah. It's good to talk to you. Don't forget to stop by once I get all settled and run out to Cass or wherever you're headed out west or out east.
Sounds good.
Thanks for calling, Michelle. I really appreciate it. It's nice to see you.
I can't even get my directions right, huh, John?
It's hard. I'd understand.
Okay. Bye.
Bye, Michelle. Thanks. I do have a question that when I was talking to Dave earlier today, it was a question I think he wanted to ask you last night, but he forgot. So this message comes from Dave, also known as Sparky 107 to probably a lot of the viewers here. And the question is, and this we're going to go to models. I know we've been talking about other stuff, but we got to talk about models at some point since that's kind of what we do. And the question is, have you ever received a model or bought a model or whatever and opened it up and looked at it and it was so bad that you knew you didn't want to do a review on it?
Well, I've had about a dozen, maybe more, maybe 20 or 30 times. We were talking about how many reviews I did. So probably about 600 reviews, or maybe 500, but there's probably about at least 15 or 20 times where the model didn't work. So I'd send it back to the dealer or the manufacturer. And then when the next one came, I would mention it at the beginning of the video. The only time I made exceptions to that is if I knew for 100% surety that UPS, FedEx, or the post office screwed it up. And that happened with the Lionel Big Boy. I mean, the whole corner of the box was just destroyed, and I knew what I was going to get when I opened the Big Boy, and it was pieces, and that's what I got. So sent that back, got it replaced, and did the review, and didn't mention it because it wasn't, it wasn't relevant to the model or the situation. It was UPS or FedEx. But yeah, that's happened, I'd say about 2 or 3% of the time. What I do is I just get a new one because we can't, how are we going to do a review if the thing won't even turn on?
Right.
Or move, or it's in pieces. And then I just mention it when I do the re-review, the actual review, say, hey, the first one I got was not working, or this, and keep an eye. Whenever I see something big, my next sentence is keep an eye on that if you're buying it, to make sure that you test it. Because some people buy stuff. My cousin's notorious for this. He'll buy it and shelf it. And then the warranty is gone, or the return policy for the dealer's done, and you haven't tested it. You haven't even tested the locomotive. So
yeah, that's happened to me too, where it was so bad that I didn't want to do a review, but it happened where I tried to run something and it was just doing weird stuff. Like you go to make it was a locomotive, and you go to make it go forward, and it would go backwards a little and then forward. And you go to make it go backwards, and it would go forward a little and then backwards. It was just weird. And I ended up sending it back to the manufacturer. And, they never did send a correct one back. So it just didn't happen.
Yeah.
We have another caller calling in. So are you done with that question? You good with that?
Yep. Good to go.
Okay. Let's talk to Dawson Railfan Adventures. How's it going? Thanks for calling. What's your question?
Hi,
Hey, how's it going?
So, like you guys have been saying, damaged engines when they arrived. Back when brass trains was still a big thing, I bought a Norfolk and Western SD45 high hood with DCC and sound, and I had a Ring doorbell. FedEx just threw it onto my porch and left it, and it damaged the engine beyond repair.
Man.
Wow.
And I was livid.
Yeah.
Do you have a question for James or for me?
Yeah. James, I've been watching your channel for a year, and I have a question for you.
Sure.
Do you think Athearn Genesis makes a correct Erie Lackawanna style SD45-2?
Yeah, since I'm not an Erie Lackawanna fan, I wouldn't want to get into the real deep prototypes, like to be able to compare, but I do know that the process they go through, if you're talking Genesis, they go through a process that's, they're doing research and they're making those road name and road number specific detail adjustments. So my bet would be that it's going to be a correct SD45-2 in EL. And I did review one, and I don't recall. I'll occasionally glance over prototype photos. I specifically don't use them in videos because it's a copyright issue. I don't have time to ask John for permission to use his photo from Southern California for an SP model or something like that. So when I do a review and I don't know what I'm doing, if I have the time, which is most of the time, I will take a look at the prototype and make sure things aren't wonky. So my bet would be yes.
My only problem with that is that I don't like it. I mean, I have a sound engine I got an Erie Lackawanna 3680, the new release sound. The only thing I don't like is that I have to reprogram the CVs to have the SU3L instead of a P3.
Yeah, the sound is kind of a different issue because there are very few manufacturers, especially I think the SD45-2s are a few years old when they did the EL schemes, it's more of a recent thing where they're making sure they have correct horn, like per model. If they're putting out like a bunch of different variations, sometimes you won't even see the correct horn on the actual model. Like if it's supposed to have a 3 chime and you see a 5 chime, I've seen that a couple times, and things like that I probably should be, paying a little more attention to. But it's hard with certain decoders because some decoders sound a lot like many of the horns will sound similar or close, and I don't have that great a hearing anyway, thanks to aircraft for 20 years. So I'm not the best for sound. I can tell you if I like the sound or not, but I record in 5.1 Dolby, so you guys can figure out if the sound's correct or not for yourselves. Yep.
Cool. All right. Hey, thanks for calling in, Dawson, Railfan Adventures. Appreciate that.
Bye.
Talk to you soon. Take care. Cool. So I have a topic that I wanted to bring up. First, I want to mention that I did put the link, and Sydney is putting the link in the live chat. If anybody's interested in participating, you can just click on that link and it'll bring you up on my screen here, and I can add you. Just FYI.
Okay.
But the question that I have, and I think we can probably both speak to this because I think we've both done product reviews, which are critical reviews, and we've both done, I think you call them product demos and I call them product spotlights, which is what I've kind of gone to doing spotlights more often for reasons I can talk about later. But I'm kind of curious about your take on that. Like, how do you describe, or how do you determine, I guess, when you're going to do a demo versus when you're going to do a critical review?
So demos are used in several cases. One, I use them if I'm in a hurry and I don't have time to do the research and I don't want to let people down by calling it a review and it doesn't have all the testing I usually do for a review. Another thing is if there's no financial sacrifice on my part, a model was provided by a company. A lot of, like we talked about last night, the last 4 reviews all have significant financial input from my pocket. My grandfather called it pocketbook. It's really a wallet, but I still keep that phrase because he used it so often. But so I have no problem calling it a review if I have the time to do the research and a little bit of the research and a little bit of the testing. But when it's just like, hey, here it is, that's when it's going to be a product demo. I don't have time to do the testing. That's going to be a product demo. And the only other case where it's usually a product demo is where it's a highly controversial model. Like there will be stuff that low-end Bachmann stuff, for example. I know people are going to get on me for like, oh, you didn't say that this doesn't have 500 parts. Well, you got to understand going into it that when you're paying $60 for a DCC and sound locomotive, that's not going to have 100 parts. So sometimes just to avoid, a bunch of ruffled feathers, I'll do a product demo and be like, listen, guys, here's what it is, because I'm not going to argue with you about whether or not, I should be reviewing this, if it's if they're demeaning the model in any way or whatever, because I think every model has a place in the hobby. There could be a 12-year-old boy whose family's on a tight budget that's getting into the hobby with a train set, and all they can afford is a Bachmann $60 locomotive they got on clearance from a retailer, and a loop of Easy Track they might have picked up at a garage sale or on eBay. And so I don't want to be like, this is horrible, because what if that 12-year-old kid's watching it and now he's like, this is everybody's bashing on my engine. Why should I be in this hobby? Or, so I'll use product demos in those manners to kind of keep things positive. But, when we're talking about highly detailed things, I like doing product reviews because we're getting to the nitty gritty. It's your hard-earned money and you need to know whether it's going to warrant it or not.
Well, I think also that companies that are charging a premium like that, you're kind of paying for that prototype specific detail also. So if it's not there, it's probably fair to mention it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Like, for example, I've done reviews on Southern Pacific stuff from the 50s, and it doesn't have a light package, a Southern Pacific light package. I don't know how familiar you are with SP, but they had all these crazy lights on the fronts and the backs of their engines up until I think the GP40s were the first ones that I'm aware of that didn't have all those lights. And if it doesn't come with that, you notice. I mean, it's the first thing I notice when it comes out of the box.
Yeah, I'm that way with like modern UP, but early on I got inundated with so many requests across the spectrum that I didn't take the time to research and know every railroad and all the little quirks of every railroad. I do know SP is famous for light packages, and sometimes reviewing photos will help me there. But we were talking about trying to slow our pace down a little bit, and if the pace is fast, I can't do the quality videos I want. So ideally, I'd like to get to about a video every 10 days, which I've been saying for years, and it's never happened. But now it's really starting to, be something I can see as a possibility with some adjustments. And then maybe I can do a little more digging and have no problem spending the time doing more digging. But you've always been more of an expert than I am. I mean, you've been in the hobby longer, but I've got no excuse at a decade for not knowing a lot of this stuff. And your product spotlights and some of your videos, you really get into the detail of what's there and what's not.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd call myself an expert. One thing that makes you an expert, though, is if you can research stuff. If you're doing if I'm doing a critical product review, which I've kind of moved away from those, because I think that critical stuff is sort of by its nature negative, and I don't want to be a negative drain on the hobby. I don't know if that makes any sense.
No, I've done that too.
Right. One of the things that I sort of decided when I decided I was going to do spotlights instead of reviews, or more spotlights and fewer reviews, is I kind of trust the viewer. I know that the video is going to look good enough for people to see what they're getting. Okay. Because I'm more of a video guy than anything, and I know how to make the videos show you what you're getting. And to me, it doesn't make sense to harp on some negative aspect of something when somebody can see what it is. Like if I pull out that Southern Pacific locomotive and it doesn't have the light package, the viewer sees it too. And if I'm doing a critical review, I'm going to dock it for that. Well, what purpose does that really serve? People see what they're getting, and I think they're smart enough to decide if that's what they want. You know what I mean? Kind of.
That is exactly the internal battle I had about 5 years, maybe even longer ago. That's why I decided to upgrade the camera, upgrade the sound. So there's so many different things people are looking for. Cab figures, for example. Are there figures in the cab? Some people will say there should be cab figures in everything. But then I hear an argument that, well, what if I'm using it as a DPU or a second unit in a lash up? That's not going to be correct. So by presenting it in a clear fashion, like we talked about last night, pulling out of the box for the very first time, people can be like, oh man, I really want to make sure this, engine has jacking pads. They can see it. It's a 360. They can pause the video, blow it up to 1080p. Some cases 4K have kind of waned to get away from 4K because of the processing time and very little gains. I did a survey and people just thought it was negatable even doing 4K, but they can see what they're looking for,
Right.
I'm a big UP yellow guy. I want my UP yellow to be a certain shade. I would like to know if it matches with certain other products that are put out UP yellow. And so that's what I'm looking for when I watch other people's reviews on UP stuff. I'm like, man, what's this yellow like? Is there anything else that's on his layout I can compare it to that's UP? Oh, there's a Walters engine. Oh, okay. Yep. Now I know that's off or that's on point.
Yeah, I guess if you recognize the models, that would be a way to do it, seeing whatever's next to it. But, you also have to think about this. The prototypes are all different shades of yellow too. And you can see that when they have a multiple unit power lash up,
Yeah.
they're not always the same. And it could be that one sat out longer someplace or has been around longer, right? Or it's been through a few more tunnels, so it's got more crap on it, soot or whatever.
Yeah,
So
I was more like on the passenger fleet. I was trying to match up a couple engines in the passenger fleet of UP cars and trying to match brass. We've had the same manufacturer make 2 or 3 different shades of UP yellow on multiple manufacturers. So yeah, I understand their paint samples could be off.
yeah.
Or just the dinge or whatever the case is.
Yeah. I would have a hard time personally, I think, unless it's like way off. There was one product review I did while I produced it. Or actually, it didn't even make it as a product review. It was an engine that somebody I know had, and it was just completely the wrong color. The real locomotive, the prototype, was a gray color, and this thing was silver. It's like, this isn't even the right color. Like, if I spent $340 for an engine and it was silver when it was supposed to be a light gray, I would be so angry. Like, I would just want to send it back. And I'd like to probably send them a bottle of gray paint and say, here, do it right. But someone's asked a question in the chat here that it was handed to me by our top secret associate producer here. They want to know if you're falling out of your chair. Because I don't know, maybe because you're way out to the side. I don't know.
Oh yeah, I was trying to do that third thing you were telling me about, but
well, yeah, I can't do it. This is what you ended up. I don't know.
Yeah, I've got back issues too, so you'll see me tilt to the non-favorable side fairly often.
Right.
Yeah.
The question was whether either of us, I guess the question was for both of us, has ever dropped a model ourselves when we're going to go set it up on the table or whatever. And
no, never done that. I'll knock on wood, but kind of a sidebar. People may have remembered that watch my channel. I had a display case of all the UP stuff, all the heritage locomotives, DDA40X, 844, 4014, 3985, the scale trains, auxiliary tenders, and it was like my pride and joy.
Uh-oh.
Well, the kids were thumping around in the basement or something, and it started rattling. This display case company has since gone out of business, and they probably should have, because they didn't put tracks, little areas where the wheels could rest inside.
Right.
But they shifted up towards the plexiglass. So I go to open it up to get something out to run, and out goes the DDA40X, 2 heritage units, 2 auxiliary tenders, and the DDA40X hit the ground and actually bent the frame. And somehow I got the frames, I took everything apart, got the frame straightened out, got everything kind of glued back together to where it was pretty much unnoticeable, surprisingly. And then the 2 scale trains auxiliary tenders were toast, so I ordered another pair, which were still in stock at the time. And the Western Pacific unit took a little bit of handrail damage, which I fixed. So it wasn't too bad. The DDA40X did lose an LED ditch light in the process too, that I never fixed because I was like, you know what? Sometimes they're out. So,
right. That's crazy. Did you figure out how much that little circumstance cost in terms of real money?
Well, luckily it wasn't any of my brass. The brass was on the other end. So it was just, let's see, $250 Ace, $450 DDA40X, and a couple $100 of tenders. So,
right,
about $900 worth of stuff that was needed to be repaired at the minimum.
Yeah. Someone else is asking a question. We have a caller waiting also, but I want to do this question real quick, which is your opinion on ready to run versus put together yourself.
Well, I entered the hobby in 2009, and I went to a shop in Sacramento, California called Bruce's Train Shop. It was a big floor, wide open space. Have you ever been there, John? I know you're SoCal, but
I'm not Southern Cal. I'm in Bay Area, actually.
Bay Area. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. It sounds familiar, but the only train shop I can remember ever going to in the Sacramento area was the one in Roseville, and I can't remember the name of it now.
Okay. Yeah, it was in that region, but I think it had a Sacramento address. But anyway, they had some blue stock or blue box stock still left. And my cousin, I was like, "What's this?" He's like, "Oh, you're not going to want that," because I was new. He's like, "You're not going to put crap together." And so I bought Genesis. I bought my first actual engines that I bought were two Athearn Genesis UPF units. And the detail was already on them, etched metal grating and stuff. So I never really got into it. Now I did buy some AccuRail stuff that I put together, very minor kit. Scale-Train's Kit Classics, very minor compared to what you used to have to do. So I am also very jittery. I could never be a brain surgeon. I don't usually do DCC installs or some of the complex DCC stuff myself. So it's not up my alley. I think it does help you build as a modeler, helps you kind of understand how modeling works a little better, gives you a little more pride in your locomotives and stuff. So there's a lot of positives as well. It's just not up my alley.
Yeah. And I think that would be along the same lines of my answer. I think that some people like to build stuff and some people like to run stuff. Some people like to build stuff and run stuff. And the real answer to the question is you get what you like. You get whatever suits your, what you want to do with the hobby. How do you enjoy the hobby, right?
Yeah.
The only real answer is you're doing it wrong if you're not enjoying it, right? So let's go to the next call here. We have Chris calling. Hello, Chris. How are you doing?
Hello, can you hear me?
Sure can.
All right, so my question is kind of almost like an extension to the last one that was just mentioned. So there's two types of people in the hobby, and one of them is the hardcore rivet counter who wants all the detail, all those features, and there's another one where they want affordable locomotives, but they almost want the same quality as the rivet counters are getting. So how do you feel about the manufacturers trying to balance that out to make everyone happy?
I think it's a good plan to have different lines, not only for detail, but for budgets. Some people can't afford to buy half a dozen sound locomotives per release. And if the manufacturers are making the same thing in a budget line, like some of them have started doing, it's a really good thing. So I think I would encourage it. I think it's something people should be able to have the option to buy. Now, I know that financials behind it too. I hear a lot of companies saying that they're doing way better with the stuff that's completely polished up, detailed out, and those sell better. But it's good to have. Like, I think the Scale Trains model is a good model, business model to have, where you've got kit classics. You can put those together. Those are just, some rolling stock, but then they've got operator locomotives, and then they have rivet counter locomotives. Athearn does the same thing, although they sometimes have different releases where they've got ready to roll and Genesis. Walthers has their main line now where you can detail up everything, or you can buy Proto, which is already detailed up. So it's becoming pretty frequent that you'll see more of that to cater to those people's needs, especially as the prices get, we're pushing $350 for MSRP for a DCC and sound diesel now. And that was DCC and sound steam costs when I was getting into the hobby. So it's, I think that's going to be more of that as they have to price themselves out with all the little details. And I'm of the opinion it's not really their fault. It's just Chinese labor costs, and there's no way to bring it back to America without costing even more. So they're going to have to come up with something to still appeal to that group of people.
Cool.
Right, because I've noticed that a lot of the stuff being made now, the prices are going up, and everyone's like, whoa, so it's it's a balancing act, and I know they're trying the hardest, and I'm applauding them for it.
Yep. Thanks for your question.
All right,
Thanks,
thank you.
Chris. And hey, Chris, you did the perfect call. You had your question and you muted yourself even. So thanks for that. Really appreciate it.
Being on online school, you learn something or two about online calls.
All right. Thanks, man. Good to
Thank
see you. Take care. Look, he even hung up himself. I was going to hit the remove button and he did it himself. That was the perfect call.
Yeah.
Everybody watching, that's how you do it. I noticed there was a question in the questions here. I'm going to just bring it up there. I just happened to see it. I'm not purposely scrolling or checking out the chat here, but I did see this pop up. Which locomotive do you wish existed that you could review and own?
I'll give you two. One is going to be produced by Division Point, which is a brass company. It's going to cost me out the ears. I wish somebody would have produced it in plastic. That's the UP coal turbine. That's one that I would like to have just because it's so neat. The other one would be the ST70 ACE Tier 4. I think somebody should go ahead and start working on and announce soon, because the railroads, they got the bugs worked out for the most part. There's still some fairly prominent issues with the locomotive itself, the real one, but I think it's widespread enough that the manufacturer should take that up and get it out, at least announced before somebody else does it, because they're somewhat competitive with each other on the race to announce products.
I'd be surprised, actually, if it's a modern EMD product. I'd be kind of surprised if Athearn isn't already working on that.
Yeah, that's the funny thing. You never know there's even cases where they're both secretly working, and then they come out and they both announced it. Atlas's auto racks, along with
Scale trains,
for example.
Yeah.
They both essentially launched their products within a few months of each other. So
that happened also with the Gevos a couple of years ago. Intermountain and Scale Trains put them out, I think, within a week of each other or something like that.
Yep.
It kind of makes me wonder, and I don't know if you would know the answer. I don't know the answer to this question, but I'm kind of curious if you do. I know that all the manufacturers, it's kind of a small community, and all the manufacturers know each other. I think a lot of us YouTube people kind of know each other. Do you think that they knew? Do you think like Intermountain knew? It's like, oh no, Scale Trains is going to come out with the same model, but let's just put, or maybe the other, put the shoe on the other foot. Maybe Scale Trains was like, oh, Intermountain is going to come out with this, so we better get ours out first, or do you think they didn't know until it happened?
On the announcements, I think that sometimes they reach out to each other. I've heard of cases of that, where they're like, hey man, we're already further in production and you guys are talking about doing this. We're just letting you know. And sometimes the other company will just press forward anyway. But not in all cases. Sometimes it's a surprise. I don't know what specifically happened with the Tier 4s. I don't know all the details of what happened with the auto racks. But what's funny is in both cases, I believe that both manufacturers sold out. So just tells you the pent-up demand for products like that to be released and snatched up by all the modelers. So nobody really lost out. So maybe that's going to encourage people or manufacturers to still just press forward if they're in development and they find out another manufacturer's got it.
Yeah. My understanding is that the manufacturers have kind of gone to a different business model too, where they're not producing as many on each run, because they don't want stock to just sit around getting old, and they don't want to have, people's, like, if they want to run something again, they're not like, oh, well, it just happened, to be that way. That didn't make a lot of sense. I got a text message while I was talking, and it totally derailed my train of thought. But you know what I mean? Like, it seems like they're doing smaller runs, and that they're trying to make it so that they don't, because it's more economical that way, right? I mean, you don't have a bunch of thousands of models sitting in a warehouse, because warehouse space also costs money.
Well,
I don't know.
It's a balancing act, and I would not want to be the guy that decides how many models are produced, because there are some things that they think are going to be home runs. I've heard it from companies. They're like, we saw polling, we saw all these indicators that this thing would sell out, and it sat. And you don't want to sell yourself short either, where you've missed out on a large amount of money. Now, there's one manufacturer I'm not going to mention that works a nerve with cutting things so short, because they've been burned a couple times with having things on the shelf to where they were doing blowouts of their products. And I think they got themselves into a remorseful situation that they'll never forget. And now you go to order something, it's like gone. You know, there's been pre-orders sold out in a couple weeks. I'm like, what are you guys producing? Like 5? So I'll go to pre-order something and it's gone. I'm like, what are you guys doing? So I fire off an email like, hey, you need to up this by 10 or 15% at least. I mean, and I am not a risk taker. If I'm telling you to do that, I think you're fairly safe. You need to up your production numbers by 10 or 15% if I can't even pre-order it in the first few weeks because it's sold out on pre-order.
Right. Here's an interesting question that popped up on the screen here from Creepy13, wanting to know if we think the manufacturers are not building the small steam locos anymore and mainly concentrating on diesels. I have the distinct sense, I'll go first if you don't mind, that because I don't see a lot of steam coming out at all. I think there seems to me to be a pretty big shift to modern prototypes. And I don't mean modern like, GP40s. I mean modern like SD70 ACEs and tier 4 stuff and new stuff. I mean, even Bachmann put out the Charger, the new Siemens locomotives that all the passenger agencies are getting. So I think there's something to that. I know Bachmann still does some steam stuff, and I know that Bachmann does narrow gauge ON30, I think is their thing. But
yeah.
What's your sense on that, James?
My sense is it's gone away for a little while, but I think it'll come back. So my concern is that we're going to end up with nothing but aces and ES44s on the rails. There was a meme I saw the other day, like rail fanning in the year 2040. It's like ES44s and aces, and that's all you see. So I think they'll get back to it. I wish manufacturers would consider doing a locomotive that's not only still on the rails today. Like there's a lot of short line railroads. There's a lot of scenic railroads and tourism trap railroads that are operating a certain type of locomotive that hasn't been done. So you can appeal to that group of modelers and the excursion modelers at the same time. But I don't know the demographics enough to say, I'd be willing to bet $250,000 on it or more for the investment of an entire project. So it's easy for us to sit here and say that when they've got to spend the money, but I think it'll come back. It's gone, or at least very slowed temporarily.
Sure seems like it. You also have to think about this, and I see people complain a lot. One of the things that kind of irks me a little bit is when people complain about how expensive something is, or, oh, why don't you do this model in this paint scheme, or why don't you do this, or why don't you do that? And you have all these people with all these very strong opinions, but they're not the ones writing the check to make it happen. And even if you do the model that they say they want, the manufacturers don't even know for sure that it's going to sell either. So the manufacturers are kind of between a rock and a hard place when you think about it. They have to do what they think is going to be marketable and what's going to sell and actually be profitable for the company so that they can fund their next project and their next project. So I see a lot of frustration from the modeling community about not getting what they say they want, but I don't see a lot of consideration being made, toward the people that actually can make it happen when it comes to, you know what I mean? Like, do you ever notice that with people?
Well, at the train shows, I noticed manufacturers getting down. I've literally seen the wind come out of manufacturers' sales based on the reception of an announcement or whatever. And that's part of the reason why I am very reluctant to ever be in the industry myself. I think that people need to understand, and I got a little taste of this when I put out my anniversary box cars. I put them out with the cheapest company I possibly could, which was at the time Value Trains USA. They're still around, but they're printed locally because I was running behind schedule, and the company I was going to work with was running behind schedule. So that still cost me an insane amount of money to produce a locally made boxcar with no details. The only separately applied detail was a brake wheel.
The trucks are separately applied, though.
Yeah. And people were like, why didn't you choose Athearn, or why didn't you do this? Or I was like, do you know the cost? Like I was
Yeah.
getting quotes from AccuRail that would wreck my checking account at a minimum. When we were first talking about producing like 150, and then it turned to 100, and then it turned to 50, I think. Anniversary boxcars to give away. And it still ended up being a project well into the 4 figures. So it's just, people have to understand. And that was one thing I never got until I started really visiting the manufacturers, getting the behind the scenes look of, hey, it's not, me and one manufacturer have a joke that everybody thinks they're millionaires sitting at their top of their hill on the mansion, drinking cognac and smoking cigars and laughing about how they're screwing the model railroader over. But it's just not the case. I mean, the companies are small, the budgets are tight. The biggest budgets I see is marketing, and I think that's very misguided most of the time, but they're starting to dial that back to where it's just getting tighter and tighter. Even the people you see at train shows are not getting paid very well, in my opinion, at all. So very few people in the industry are getting paid what I consider a good wage. So just consider that before you beat people up, because there's a lot of factors to consider.
Yeah, I know a lot of people that I've talked to also in the industry, and they all tell me the same thing, that the margins aren't as big as you think they are. And I was even having kind of a back and forth, sort of just a conversation in one of my videos recently about manufacturers that want to sell direct and not go through hobby stores. And the person I was talking to, who I think was watching, was saying that he thought it was unfair and thought that they should sell through the hobby shops too, because those people have to eat too. And I totally get it. I mean, I get that whole idea that everybody has to eat. But if a manufacturer's going to make the decision that they want to do business that way, I don't know that I'm anyone to criticize them for it if they can make it happen. If you're good enough with your web presence that you can do direct sales, who am I to criticize or complain about it?
Well, I did a train show report. It was, I think, the year before I did train show videos, and I went to a manufacturer and I brought that up. I was like, people are complaining that you guys are selling direct, and I said, that's the exact same sentence. I said, the hobby shops, they have to be able to sustain. He's like, James, when you do a renovation on your house, do you hire a contractor? I was like, well, in a couple cases with rentals I have, the houses I own and rent out, but mostly it's convenience because I know they're eating up my cost. They're adding a ton to it. He's like, well, that's the problem. Are you responsible for that contractor eating? He's like, I was like, well, no. He's like, now make that a bigger scale. There's 400 hobby shops or whatever there was at the time across the country. Am I supposed to be responsible for every one of those guys eating? I can't. I have to worry about my employees. They come first on whether I can make sure that I'm sustaining for those employees and keeping the company going, So I understood it a little better, and I never judge anybody for not selling to hobby shops because they're business owners. They're taking a risk. In a perfect world, absolutely, we should help them out when we can. I've plugged local hobby shops every place I've been, but they're taking a risk, and sometimes the companies are going to sway that way.
Right. All right. Well, on that note, we have some more callers waiting, so let me get to our next one. Welcome, James. Hey, wow, the beard's getting even bigger. How's it going?
All right. Yeah, I've decided to not really shave until I have to go back into the office full time. So
I'm jealous.
I was in the Navy for 4 years, so I've taken every advantage that I can when I got out, which has been almost a decade now.
Yeah.
Anyways, my question was for James. I wanted to ask you, now that you're out and once you get a home of your own to stay in for however long you decide to stay there, are you looking to do more how-tos and stuff like that? Or are you going to kind of stay with the reviews a little bit? Or the demos and such?
Yeah, I do want to mix it up because it gets monotonous with reviews over and over again. And the house we're looking for, the reason it's taken so long is because we're looking for a forever home. We don't want to move anymore. And that includes a large layout area. So what I'm probably going to do is quickly off camera get the bench work up, which is probably not going to be done by me, but I might be helping. And then once the bench work is up, and I'll do videos probably mostly on scenery, backdrops, some of the quirky things, but I'm probably not going to do track laying anymore. I've done that a few times. So I'll pick different topics that I haven't covered before, especially in my last series where it was covered a little better than my first series where I really didn't know what I was doing. So I don't want to be too repetitive with what was covered. So I'll pick different topics, but scenery centric. And then I'll still pepper in reviews and product demos.
Cool.
All right. Yeah, it was basically the question I had for you. So
Okay.
it's good
Thanks,
to talk
James.
to you both.
Yep. Hope to see you
Yep.
soon.
Talk to you later.
Take care, man.
All right.
All right. Cool. Well, let's bring in another caller if that's okay with you. Oh, he just put his camera back on. So we'll go to Cole. Hello. Cole. What's your question?
Hey, Cole.
Well, I kind of got two. Well,
Okay.
not really questions, but one is I think they should bring back an 844 DUP HO scale.
Mm-hmm.
And the second one is to touch on the hobby store a little bit. I think they should sell on eBay. They could do that too, because I've done that. Bought stuff from hobby shops on eBay.
So you think hobby shops should sell their stuff on eBay? Okay.
Yeah, that too, because then they can ship anywhere.
Yeah.
All right.
So two thoughts. I agree with you on 844. What I would like to see is somebody do an accurate model. I've got 5 different big boys, 5 or 6 different big boys, and not one of them has everything correct. So I think somebody really needs to research, retool, and do an 844 correct. So I agree with you there with that added in. Hobby shops and eBay, it does give them a little more exposure. The only negative to that is eBay, I think, is running something around 13% when you consider eBay's fees and PayPal fees.
Oh.
And if they don't use PayPal and they use credit cards, they're 2.5% to 4% on the credit cards. And I just know that from my business acumen. But overall, it can take away up to 14% of their cost. And they're already operating in fairly thin margins. So that's the only bad thing about eBay. But if they've got stock that's sitting and they need money in hand, that is a good option to go to. My local hobby shop in Omaha has resorted to eBay and keeps things fairly regular on eBay. They also buy out used items. I brought in a whole bunch of stuff and traded like tons of stuff for a locomotive, which I totally got ripped on, but I wanted it gone and I wanted this one locomotive for review. So I traded it in. I traded in a bunch of Easy Track, a bunch of rolling stock, and some other stuff to get this one locomotive to review without having a cost out of pocket. So those are ways that hobby shops can bring in money.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for calling in, Cole. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
And thanks for your patience while you were waiting. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Bye-bye. All right. So we have my other buddy Alvin waiting on the wings. We also have Heath waiting. So Alvin called in first. So we're going to go to Alvin first. And then there's a good question that came up in the live chat that I'm looking at here. But let's talk to Alvin first. All right.
Okay.
Sick trains, bro.
Sick trains, bro. Sorry, I'm in the car. My lighting is garbage.
What are you doing in the car?
Oh, I just dropped off my coworker. We're social distancing on my porch.
Oh,
hanging out.
So do you have a question for James?
I don't have a question for James, but I wanted to say thanks for all the videos. So when I first got into the hobby, I was searching YouTube, and a lot of them I watched your first one where you built your layout, and it looked like a living room with a fireplace in the background. I don't know.
My first layout, yeah, it was a basement with a fireplace.
Okay.
Or second, third layout, I think that was, yeah.
That was cool. I really like that. So thanks for the good content.
Thanks for watching, man.
No problem. I went to I was in Nebraska because I know you lived there at one point, and I was going to be like,
you were
hey,
stalking
man.
James?
Well, he said it on his videos.
Okay.
Right? I think, I don't know, but I was going to be like, hey man, let's meet up, but I didn't want to be like weird.
Oh no, I've met up with people before. It doesn't bother me. I met a truck driver at a truck stop. I've had people come to my house. I don't mind. It doesn't bother me much.
Okay. Well, now I know. I mean, I was in Lincoln anyway, which is an hour away. You lived in Omaha, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I don't know. It wouldn't have worked anyway. But
Hey, Michelle's still watching, Alvin. She says, "How's my legit bro?"
I see that in my corner there. I was almost gonna have legit pizza for dinner, but I didn't. Well, maybe I still might. I don't know. I haven't eaten yet.
Yeah.
Kind of hungry.
Well, if you have legit pizza, have some for me too.
Oh man, you know I will. Now I have a fridge big enough to put a pizza box in. Ugh.
Right. Cool. Do you have any more
Yeah.
questions, comments, or insults?
I can't think of any.
Okay. Well, you can always call back if you think of more.
Okay. Yeah, I can't think of any.
That's okay. I can't think either.
I got some inappropriate jokes, but I'll save that for later.
Yeah, we'll do that when we're not on live streaming.
Okay, sounds good.
All right. Thanks, man.
Hi, Michelle. Bye, Michelle.
Talk to you later.
Wait, how long are you going to be doing this for?
We have about almost an hour.
Oh, okay. I'll call back when I get home.
Oh, okay. I'll talk to you later.
I'll think about it. Okay.
All right. Bye. Here's one that came up a while back in the chat that I thought was kind of a cool question, and it has to do with the future. I mean, we really should probably end with this, but it was such a good question, and I don't want to lose it. What do you think about the future of the hobby? Do you think because this comes up all the time, and since we're on my channel, I think I've opined about this on podcasts and on other live shows. What do you think, James? Do you think the hobby's dying like so many naysayers like to complain about? Or
I hear a lot of, I'm privy to a lot of conversations. A lot of manufacturers drop, just one sentence that kind of cues into my business-driven mind about how things work, and you develop a picture over even the last year, and it's the opposite. The hobby is thriving. Manufacturers, they probably don't want you guys to know this, but they are doing all-time highs.
They're doing exceptionally well.
With COVID, a lot of them will tell you they're doing all-time highs in terms of sales with COVID. And even before that, they were really succeeding at the detailed lines, the more expensive stuff. But there was a hole left when the brass industry kind of fell apart, with the exception of a few companies. And I think that's helping them, because you have all these brass modelers after the higher detailed plastic now. And then you've got just the hobby is spreading. It's never going to be mainstream like in the 50s, where it was normal to have a train in your basement. And, it was on shows where the dad's running the train. It's always going to have that kind of negative connotation, I think, where they're kind of making fun of us a little bit. But there's going to be more closet modelers. And you'd be surprised when somebody finds out I have a channel. They'll be like, well, I've got a set, I need to set up, or, I run in my basement, or they don't really talk about it. But it's the basics of the hobby that they're into. So I see it thriving. I don't know if it has quite the same job security as some things out there. But I do worry. The only thing I worry about is once everything on the main line is, if the variety on the main line, like we were talking about earlier, goes down to aces and Givos, then we got a little bit of a problem. But they can start focusing on the different eras that people have been wanting them to then. So,
well, by then we'll probably have other, tier 5 or some other variations, I'm sure.
Well, I think the argument or the concern was that they're going to look so similar, like the Ace Tier 4 and the Ace Tier 3 are somewhat similar. There's some differences, but it's just not as different as like your SP models with all the different light packages and all that variety. That's just so different that it catches the eyes.
Yeah. Well, I know a lot of people choose their era, based on the variety too. Like if you model anything pre-80s, there were a whole lot more railroads and different paint schemes to choose from and to have as through power, for example. Now, at least in the United States, you have 6 choices. You can have R4 class 1s, and you have the 2 class 1s in Canada, and that's pretty, or maybe Ferromex also. You see those once in a while out on the main line.
Yeah, it's you got the schemes too, which is a good point. There'll be some variety there too. So
yeah, it's just a matter of time, I think, James, until people are longing for the days when they could see a Gevo on the rails. Because think about that. I mean, when I started doing prototype videos 15 some odd years ago, we still had SD70, SD60s out on the rails that you really don't. Well, I mean, I guess you see SD70Ms once in a while, but not often. And when you do, it's like, oh, that's an older locomotive. They were new or considered new when I started watching, and all the locals were running with old Jeeps and stuff. Now all the locals are running with like SD70Ms and SD60s or GP60s or whatever. So it's just a matter of time, and things change. People will complain. That's just the nature of it. People always complain.
Yep.
I got a message from our top secret thing. Hold on just one second. Did he leave a comment that I'm supposed to see? Because I don't see one here from him. How far up was it?
Just up a little bit.
Well, I'll try to find it, but I'll search for it while we have our next caller talk to us, because our next caller has something. I think I know part of what he's going to say. So let's bring in Heath real quick.
Okay.
Hello, Heath.
Hello there, James. Hello, John.
Hey.
Hello. I hope you're going to talk a little. Well, I hope you have a question for James or me, and I hope you're going to talk about your giveaway while I look for this question.
I could talk about the giveaway as well. I was going to ask the question that you literally just pulled out of the chat, so I'm going to come up with something different, or at least hopefully something different. James, you do have a lot of connections in the industry. You've been to a lot of manufacturers. You've got the inside scoop sometimes. Is there anything though that you haven't done yet that you like really want to do or see or like meet? Is there like a manufacturer or even just a person in the hobby or a place like Miniature Wonderland or any sort of thing like that that's like your holy grail?
It's actually a good point, because you mentioned, I was trying to think, and then you mentioned it. I would like to get out to Miniature Wonderland. There's a little bit of reluctance with that, just because I'm so tired of travel. And then the train systems out there, or the train transportation network out there is color-coded, and I'm colorblind, so that's fun. So if I go, I've talked to Reynolds a couple times. Their specialty is European stuff. And I thought maybe I'd hitch a ride, just book my flight when they're booking their flight, and get out there together so I can just kind of be on their coattails for a little while and then get my way to Miniature Wonderland. So yeah, that would be one. All the manufacturers are covered for the most part. Some of them I've asked them if they wanted to be on film and they didn't, but then they allowed it for like magazines and stuff. I'm like, okay, whatever. So there's one thing I'm thinking of in particular that I would have liked to have done that I didn't, because they were being kind of dumb about it, in my opinion. So I've kind of written them off as like, I'm not going to do it. It was a warehouse type operation tied to a manufacturer, and they didn't want me filming the warehouse, but then they let somebody else film the warehouse. I think actually prior to me. So I was like, okay, whatever. But those are the videos that get a lot of attention, so they missed out on all that exposure. So not my problem. But I did Miniature Wonderland. I did, or not Miniature Wonderland, the America version, which is a little rougher around the edges, but it's in New Jersey. I forget the name of it.
Northlands is the one in New Jersey, yeah. And then there was Gulliver's Gate in New York City for a little while as well.
Yeah, I was supposed to make it to Gulliver's Gate, and I had to kick a family member off of a trip to New York while I was visiting Train World. so I did not get the ability to get to Gulliver's Gate. I was in pretty bad state at the time. When I get really mad, I can't sleep. It was a long drive back to Indiana just to drop the person off. So I ended up paying to fly them home, and it was like a whole mess. So I was like, well, it's either a couple hours of sleep or Gulliver's Gate. So I ended up getting a couple hours of sleep. And then I drove from Long Island on the beach basically to Indiana, which was like, I thought I was going to die. I called my dad up. I'm like, if I fall asleep at the wheel and die, I want you to sue this family member because this is their fault. So I was that tired, so I didn't get to go to Gulliver's Gate, and then it closed. So, but I had a feeling it was going to close because I saw the operation and how, I'd been privy to behind the scenes on how they were kind of setting up, and I was like, this is not sustainable.
Yeah, that was I don't know if you know, I'm based in New York City. So I actually did get to see it once, and then I was about to go see it again like February 4th or something, and it closed January 31st. Like I missed it by a couple days.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm just a negative Nelly, but there's been two. Well, one of them I can't really talk about yet, but there have been two things, or will be one other thing, probably public soon, that I was like, when they first set up, my business acumen, which is not that great, but it was common sense. I was like, they're not gonna succeed, and both of them are now belly up. So it's it's sad, but you have to think about all the possibilities when you're setting up a business, and that's why I'm not a business owner, because I will run ragged doing that and end up not setting up a business based on the risks. So
yeah, no, absolutely.
Tell us about the train giveaway, Heath.
Okay. Yeah. See, it would have fit in better with my other question, because I was going to ask him what he thinks about like the youth in the hobby and how to get the youth into the hobby.
Oh, that's actually a good question. We could talk about that.
Oh, okay. There you go.
Before we do, I do want to make a quick mention. There was a comment by Night Owl Modeler. That's our friend Jason Hill, who's been on the channel here before. He has Owl Mountain models. They do kits and detail kits and stuff like that. And he said that it's been very painful as a manufacturer. And I think that both James and I were talking about the large manufacturers who do the huge runs. Well, I mean, what we're calling huge runs in this context. I know that a lot of the smaller manufacturers, and I'm particularly keen to Jason's struggle because he and I have talked about that. So I guess there is a bit of a clarification on that the larger manufacturers are doing a lot better because people are sitting at home ordering stuff to work on or to run. So sorry.
Right. No,
I just wanted to mention that real quick. I'm sorry, James. I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
Yeah, the one thing I do really feel for in this case is all the vendors that were at train shows that can't do that. I wanted to try to set something up where they had a platform to talk, but I tried to pull the list from TrainFest and it had already been pulled down, so I had no list to go off of what vendors and chase them down. So I was trying to get them a platform online so they could try to sell their products.
James, if I can jump in here, actually, because I'm going to interview John, who's the show director from
Amherst,
in January, and he's actually trying to do a digital show, because that's exactly something that he mentioned in a podcast that he did. Was for a lot of those vendors, they make their money for the year at Amherst, right? And now they don't have that outlet, and he's trying to figure out how to digitally give them a platform to do that. So if that's something you're interested in, I know that's something he's trying to do as well. So it might be worth trying to connect with him on that.
Yeah, absolutely. You can give him my, I'll have John give you my cell phone number.
Okay.
And definitely, I'll provide my channel for that platform. I feel for those guys, and I was trying to get it together for Milwaukee. And frankly, we're going to talk frankly here. Milwaukee tried to do their own thing, and kind of, in my opinion, snubbed me and possibly Train World out. And they ended up with a couple hundred views per video and like 6 videos. I was like, we already had the platform set up. Why didn't you just? So I want to be able to help those guys in Amherst because we couldn't get it together from Milwaukee. and just give them my platform. If they just want to
Yeah.
chop it up like Train World does with their shows or whatever, I don't care. I'll sit here all night and let them plug their product, and then I'll go back and timestamp it so people can find it and maybe purchase some products. I don't know how big of an impact it'll have because, some of my videos get a few thousand views, and then we'll have some that get 300,000 in a couple weeks.
Yeah.
So
I think though the point though is to make the effort to put it out there, and I'm willing to do that on the TSG channel as well if anybody's interested. I mean, that's part of the reason that I'm always happy to have Jason come back on, because he's a smaller manufacturer. I don't know if you guys have heard about this, but there's a guy in Florida that's doing these train shows. I don't know how how popular they are, but he's having small manufacturers, and I think it's mostly based like narrow gauge stuff. His name's Jim Kellow, Kellow, and I forget now the name of the show that he does. It's like I think it's New Tracks or something like that. Yeah. And I apologize. If I knew we were going to talk about this, I would have looked up the information, because my memories, when I read it, I know it and then I forget.
Yeah. And just to clarify, John, and I'm sure you didn't mean it this way, but just to clarify for the audience, I don't care about views as much as that I want the people that are presenting to be able to get an income back from that.
Yes.
Right. My channel has this wacky model where some videos catch and some don't. And I don't know. I want them going into it understanding that, hey, you may only get a few views, or you might get your doors blown off, and that's how I've had it before with manufacturers, small companies. When I've done train videos, I'll do a 50-second segment in a 30-minute train video of a show, and manufacturers of small stuff, like one guy was making these test tracks, so he sold out based on that, and he couldn't keep up.
Yeah.
And
I didn't mean to put you on the spot by bringing it up. It was just when I heard him mention he was trying to do this. I mean, I don't have a very big platform, but I thought, like, at least I can do what I could do, to get him some time to talk to the people that do follow me. So yeah, if you're willing, I think it's great, and I don't think anybody took, or at least I didn't take what you said the wrong way at all. I thought, I think we are all on the same page. Yeah.
I didn't hear it that way either, James, but that was very sensitive of you to think about that.
Yeah. No, I was just thinking about the viewers. I didn't want them thinking, "Oh man, this guy only cares about views." It was just, are we going to get the sales for those guys? And I want them going into it knowing that it could be great or not.
I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that I don't think they would mind the exposure, because, like you were saying, and I as I'm thinking about this, I'm realizing what we're really talking about is the difference between a huge manufacturer like Athearn or Atlas or one of those, or my friend Jason, who does Owl Mountain models, where they're lucky to put out a kit or two, and it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
And they generate their sales and their income mostly from doing shows. And we don't have any shows, right? In-person shows. So I think it's a good idea to put it out there online. And like I said, Heath, if you want to, maybe we can even do a multi-channel thing where we all push it out there and let the small manufacturers get the word out there and how people can visit their website or whatever, I
don't have the platform size, but I definitely have some, tech know-how that I can definitely help, make sure that it's technically a smooth process. And John, this actually came up in the comments of one of your videos recently, where people that are selling direct to the public, especially if they're smaller companies, don't have the distribution or the access to get their products out to people without trade shows like Amherst or other trade shows.
So the volume is very limited.
Yeah, so it's very important to help, especially, the sponsors on my channel are much smaller companies, but I actually think they make good products, which is why, I'm a part of it. And if they're not getting seen, they're going to disappear.
Right.
Especially in these times. So,
right.
Yeah.
All right.
So do we want to talk about youths in the hobby, or have I taken up too much time?
Yeah. Well, I got like two other people waiting right now. So maybe talk about your train giveaway, and we'll do the youth, because that's a great topic. We can do that some other time.
Yeah. So real quick, There's a couple of us YouTubers who remember what it was like to get our first train set, and a lot of us got them over the holidays as gifts. And times are changing, things are different. Kids aren't necessarily getting train sets as kids. So what we decided to do was get the community together, pull some money, and buy some starter sets to give away. So on December 13th, this coming up week, I'm going to be giving away 3 starter sets on my Sunday night live stream at 8 p.m. But we're also going to have Michelle Kempema join us. She has a youth program at the Colorado Railroad Museum.
Model Railroad Museum.
Model Railroad Museum. Thank you. I always mix them up. So Michelle's going to come on and talk about the youth program that she does at the museum. So any money that comes in addition to what covers the purchase of the sets, we're going to then donate to her youth program so that, this holiday season, we can make an impact on getting this hobby out in front of kids who might not, be able to see it.
Yeah, I think it's a worthy endeavor. And I realize that's not really directly related to our conversation here, James, but I think it's worth putting that out there because I know train sets under the Christmas tree when you're opening your presents is a pretty exciting thing as a kid. So,
well, and that's I know you said not to talk about it, but the youth in the hobby, that is a key part, is making sure we're accepting, understanding, and not bashing people in the process. So,
well, it's like you were talking about earlier, James, and I think you brought up a good point when you were saying, who are we as a reviewer or as someone showing this stuff to say this $60 engine is a piece of crap? Well, you're just crapped all over that kid that just got it, and that's not cool.
Right.
So anyway, thanks, Heath. I really do appreciate that. And
thanks for having me.
Cool. You're welcome. I'll talk to you soon, right?
Talk to you later.
Thank you. Okay. We'll go real quick here. We have actually Jason from Owl Mountain Models is calling, but Dave has been waiting for a while. So let's get Dave on real quick and we'll go to Jason as soon as possible because I know he has limited online. He's going to be a voice call. So let's go to Dave first real quick. Hey, Dave, welcome. How you doing?
Hi, John. Hi, James. So, James, I saw you last year up at Train Fest up in Milwaukee.
Yep.
So my questions for you is, when you go and do these shows, do you go to any place after, like, for example, up at Train Fest, up at NAPM, or like the O scale in downtown Milwaukee, or stuff like that? And do you also plan your trips around vacations? So, like, if they had the NMRA convention in St. Louis, would you go down to St. Louis, maybe go down to the museum and do other touristy stuff?
So to answer the first question, I felt really bad at Milwaukee because I got invited to NAPM on year 2, and after years of doing it, I never made it to NAPM, and the reason was I wanted to have the video edited and uploaded so that everybody could see it on Sunday as if they were at the show. So Milwaukee to me was important to get everybody that couldn't make it the ability to still get almost real-time information about the show. So I never got to do that. I was in editing that night and then into Sunday morning, like up to midnight a lot of times. And then I would go get up at like 7 and drive back down to Indiana to drop off my cameraman if I was using my cousin, or back to Omaha if I was using Bob as a camera person. So it was just no time. And what I usually did was, in terms of vacation time, was I squeezed it in on the weekends. I started taking Fridays. The thing about the military was, you're essentially a salaried person. So, and they know you've spent so much time overseas, you could either take a vacation day or sometimes you could work a portion of the day and take off. And the same thing still exists with this job that I've taken with the hospital as business development manager. I spoke to my boss, which is like the vice president, about being able to work remotely from my laptop and maybe spend a little portion of the day at work and then head off to a show, because the first year is terrible in terms of vacation time, and then it gets pretty good. But I won't really hit that second year before we hit the national show next year. So I'm going to try to make the national show and save a little vacation time in the process that way. But Amherst, we went out to dinner with a bunch of modelers and a couple people from a company because I was like, this is just too much to be able to get edited in one day. And I think I actually shot into the second day a little bit in Amherst. So I try to when I can. There's a lot of great camaraderie with spending time with modelers. Denver, I was able to spend time with modelers afterwards. So I do when I can, but it's more editing in Milwaukee.
Yeah, I don't recall if Randy oversees Amherst or not. I know he doesn't do Train Fest.
No, it's Mike Slater that oversees Train Fest now. Amherst is. Oh, we just said his name earlier.
John something, I thought.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so it's not Randy and
Acrodote or something. Or
it's not Randy and his company then that does 99.9% of the train shows.
those are that is World's Greatest Hobby.
Yeah.
I've worked with them too to be able to do at least one video traveling. I'm like, hey, can you guys let me in a little early where there's not crowds to be able to show what they do with all the shows around. That'll probably kick back up in 2022 is my guess, unless they want to pick it up midpoint in 2021.
All depends on what happens with COVID, I would think.
That is true.
Yeah, I think by fall it's supposed to be, herd immunity or something with the vaccinations and then the spread. So.
And then when it comes to youth and model railroading and all that stuff, up at our museum, I'm a volunteer up at the Illinois Railway Museum. Every single year we have a merit badge clinic. So we do the railroading merit badge at the museum, which
Cool.
we do everything because we have everything. So we try, and there's a venture crew that comes out, and there's one in, I think, the Lombard Downers Grove area, that the venture crew itself is a portable group. So they go to the local train shows as well. So we do have that as well. So that's something else to consider is if you guys, for getting youth and model railroading, scouting is big. And if you can try and host it at like a railroad museum, or if in Michelle's case, maybe even starting one up at the Colorado Model Railroad Museum, you can talk about anything and everything there as long as you have the volunteers, the people that are there and everything all in.
I want to spread. I talked to Michelle about doing a segment just on the museum because just its existence really helps facilitate getting kids into the hobby. If a family's on a road trip or out of COVID at that point, and they see, some of the advertisements for the Colorado Model Railroad Museum, they can, stop, and they usually do stop to entertain the kids. And that gets them all interested. And sometimes it's just a little spark that sits for a while and then it, reignites like it did with me years later, and you're back into it.
One of the clubs out here next year for Train Fest, they will be going out there. They actually do allow kids to operate. And that's Valley Model Railroad. And they are, and I think I told John this last Friday, is there is in South Elgin, an old Chicago Aurora and Elgin substation where that club is based out of. That's been around since the 1950s. And they have a portable layout that they go to all the train shows in Illinois, and also works with Randy and a few others. So more than likely they might be going up to Train Fest and all that stuff next year.
Cool.
If and when. But there's also some colleges too that also have model railroad clubs as well. So even if you don't get the kids involved early, if they go to a college like IIT, UIUC, those two are that I can think of off the top of my head in our area, they have model railroad clubs as well. So if kids go to school there and they're also big into trains, win-win. It's just a bonus feature.
Cool.
Well, thanks for the input, Dave. I think we've got a lot of good things going on in the hobby, and kids getting involved is a main one. So appreciate the input.
Thanks, Dave.
You guys have a good evening. I'll continue to watch the show from here.
Thank you. Take care, man. We had a comment, and we're going to go to Jason after this, but I want to mention this because I think it's a pretty legit question from Reading Railroad fan. which is, do you think the manufacturers are judged on the same level, or do you think people should know the type of manufacturer? Like, are they budget friendly? You know, we kind of talked about that earlier when you were talking about the difference between, you know, the rivet counter and the operators. And, you know, you have your Atherns, which now they have a Genesis or just the regular, I guess it's ready to roll or ready to run. Atlas. Well, I guess Atlas kind of has the same things, but they're just DC or DCC. They're gold and silver line, but they have Train Man, right?
Mhm.
Everybody, it seems like a lot of these manufacturers have sort of a budget or less detailed version of the same model. Do you think that they get judged on? I mean, I know when I'm showing something on my channel, I don't make a judgment. I mean, I will tell people, look, like for example, I just did one recently that was for Train Man Atlas models. It's not out yet, but it'll be out soon. And I mentioned that, you know, this is Train Man, so it's a budget line, so the detail won't be quite as high. So, I mean, I guess, I haven't noticed, do you do that too with yours?
I've seen some drama queens in the hobby judge stuff based on, like Bachman, for example, MSRP. They go off MSRP. They make this big to do about, oh, this MSRP is insane for what you're getting. Well, I look at everything through the lens of what is its intent? How do they operate? I know that Bachman operates with a higher percentage of a discount for their dealers, and then their dealers pass that on to the customer. So it's not unheard of to see an MSRP, a Bachman item, 50% off MSRP, where it's very unheard of to see that brand new from Athearn. And then the detail level. So every time I do a review, I scale myself to what's going on. If I'm looking at an Athearn Genesis locomotive, they're trying to charge $340 MSRP for, and I see some stuff that's out of place, I will mention it. If I am actually paying that price and getting a Bachman or a Walther's mainline level detail, there's been videos where I've flat out ticked off manufacturers by saying certain things, or in forums, and they come chew me out at a train show, and I just give it right back to them. But there's a lens you have to look through that as for each item. And the only other thing that's really hard to judge is, John, if you were, you know, let's say a multimillionaire, like they got a big inheritance or something like that, and you bought a Athearn Genesis locomotive, that will cost you $350. And if I am a bus driver, you know, what do you call it, salt of the earth type guy, I'm a blue collar guy that's barely struggling to make $15 an hour, and I buy a $350 locomotive, that is a big difference, you know. And so I try to take that into fact too, and I won't sit there and say this is cheap or this is expensive. I try, because the audience is so wide, I try to keep that somewhat subjective, which sometimes looks like people think I'm sugarcoating. I'm just trying to keep it subjective for the entire audience. If you're a 16-year-old kid working at a restaurant where it takes you 2 paychecks to accumulate enough to buy a sound locomotive, you know, that's the best thing since sliced bread, and you better not crap on it, because, you know, that's what you've been looking forward to for weeks. Or us, you know, we might just buy it and be like, okay, cool, run it for a little while, throw it on the shelf, run it in a consist on occasion. So it's hard to keep all that in balance, but I try.
Yeah, I think I do something similar where I'm not really judging the price because of that whole subjectivity issue that you brought up, because, you know, $15 for a Train Man car is a lot of money to some people, and it's nothing to other people. So if you just say this is what the MSRP is, that's it. There's no need to make any further judgment there.
Right.
You know, when I get a model and I paid $30, do I think it should have metal wheels and body mounted couplers? For me, I do. But when I'm showing it on a product spotlight, the viewer can see what it has. They know how much it costs, and they can decide if that's what they want. Right?
Well, there's channels out there that they're doing it to get views, which annoys me, where they'll make some big to do about a locomotive not being what they thought it was going to be. And then they get all the viewers who can't afford it or also want to just pile on that manufacturer and, adding fuel to the fire. And I just choose to look through the hobby lens, or the entire hobby. I look through as a positive, where most of my life I'm criticizing and critiquing the crap out of everything. But when I'm in my hobby, I want to have fun, Now, if I buy a brand new car and that thing's been in the shop 20 times, I am up somebody's butt. We bought an SUV a couple years ago, brand new, and they could not get the air conditioning to stay charged. And I'm like, finally, I'm with the, I can't remember, like the second or third guy for the entire auto group. I'm up here at his rear end about, you replace every piece of plumbing, everything on that until it works, or we're going to go to court over the lemon law. So,
Right.
But with my hobby, it's like, okay, it doesn't work. Do I suck it up? No, I send it back, get a different one, but it's not the end of the world,
Yeah.
because I want to be able to enjoy that. That's my positive time, and I'm a fairly negative person.
I try to stay positive as much as possible. I think maybe that's why I'm doing product spotlights and not critical reviews, because the critical reviews, you're saying, it was funny too. I had a conversation. I think it was on one of Ken Patterson's shows, that one of the early ones that I was on like 2.5 years ago. And he said something to me about how the manufacturers want to get 10 out of 10 spikes, right? Because I had the golden spike rating system that I had and I told Ken with the straightest face, if they want 10 spikes, they can make a 10 spike model. I was like, that was just being totally, hardcore about it. But I mean, I felt that way at the time. At the time, I think I was feeling more like I was doing a public service by showing people, this is what you're going to get. So watch out for this, watch out for that. I think I've calmed down a lot since then.
Well, there's ways of, people, we need those people because those people that are very specific will drive the manufacturers to do a better job.
Yeah.
My reviews, they're not nearly as hardcore as some of the people out there, but I've had several manufacturers say, man, we really took this to heart, so we've corrected it for the next run. I'm like,
well,
okay.
There's a great example. I know that, and it wasn't just on my channel, but a lot of people complained about Athearn using bulbs for years and said, why don't they use LEDs? Why don't they use LEDs? And guess what? Now they use LEDs. Yeah. And I have a theory, and I know someone who could probably answer the question. Maybe I'll ask him sometime. My theory is that I thought they must have bought 1 million bulbs 30 years ago, and they were just finishing what they had. Kind of like the guy that's going to quit smoking, but he wants to smoke the last few cigarettes into the pack of cigarettes.
Yeah, I actually asked that question at the time, and I thought the same thing. They told me, I don't know if it's true, but they told me that because the LEDs had different dimensions, the casings, that they had to actually do slight retooling, and that cost a lot of money, and that's why they took so long.
Oh, interesting, huh?
I don't know. I just take them at face value, but that's what I was told.
Yeah. All right. Well, I've had Jason waiting for a long time, so I'm going to bring him on here, and we'll see what he has to say. I'm sure he'll have something to say about small manufacturers and big manufacturers. Hi, Jason.
Hi, guys. How's it going?
Good, good.
Well, I just decided to drop in, and I kind of heard where your conversation was going, so I said, well, maybe I'll drop in and see what you guys have to say.
Well, I think you probably have something legit to say about this too, being a small, really mom and pop type of manufacturer. How's it been for you? I mean, we know that the large manufacturers are getting a lot of business because people are staying home, but how about the kits?
Yeah,
it's been harder, huh?
I don't know. Some of my intel from the bigger guys are actually saying that China stuff's pretty messed up right now. So, but that's just my backdoor information that I don't, I can't really say one way or the other, but that's what I've heard. But as for us, we were working for months to get the Blackburn sugar beet racks that you're showing on there as my little thumbnail, to get those things ready. We were doing all kinds of tooling and stuff over the end of last year, and we released the kit right when the lockdown started.
Jason, is this your way of getting some product placement?
No, I was wanted to talk about this, but maybe. But no, I was just going to have this as an example that we released a new product right into the market when everything freaked out, and we've basically. It was interesting because we had some reservations, no money reserves, basically. People saying, "Hey, we're interested in the model." I think I had 2 or 3 people back out on their reservations, which is fine, no big deal. I'm not holding them to it. It's not like I'm going to go find them at a meet that we're not having and put some screws to them or anything. But we did see kind of a slide in the last couple of months of, I think everybody's just tightening their belts really tight because of the, losing jobs and uncertainty and so forth like that. So that's been hard. And then, trying to maneuver to see what's, the standard problem of, everybody's only going to be interested in what's new. What are you going to do for me today kind of stuff. And trying to get the tooling and everything going for the next couple projects has just been very slow. Logistic trains are fouled up. Shipping things is just tripped up. So, we're going to be doing this new 280 project, and I'm hoping in the next, I don't know when exactly, but we're hoping to get the tooling cut to be able to do this crazy supply chain that's probably going to take a couple months, 2, 3, 4 months to get the parts. And it's just going to be, we have people on reservation right now for these custom parts, but, we just hope we survive long enough to get the parts,
Right. It's a struggle.
Yeah.
The struggle is real, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And you bring up a good point about. Oh, I'm sorry, John. Go ahead.
Oh, I figured I'd let you go, James, because I just put someone asked for a link to Jason's Owl Mountain models.
We
can do that before you take off, though, Jason. So go ahead, James. Sorry.
I was just gonna say that, you bring up a good point about China, because I sat in a meeting a couple of years ago that all I remember getting out of it, because it's a bunch of boring military stuff, was manufacturing in China was not going to be sustainable for companies forever, or for even maybe 10 or 20 years is how I felt leaving that meeting.
Yeah.
You got to be careful because, sometimes the presenter or the person giving the briefing is biased one way or another. But I remember a sense of, man, they better find somewhere else when I left. And it was all political and Chinese government stuff, but the plan for some manufacturers, they had started looking in Indonesia and areas like that. Broadway Limited came out and said when the tariff issue was coming up that they were going to start looking somewhere else. I don't know where they were at in that process or if they gave up, but they actually mentioned it publicly in some sort of radio interview, and then they put it on their Facebook page. So I think there was probably some snags going on in China between the virus.
Yeah.
I know there's logistical snags. Scale-Trains has publicly come out and said they're like number 70 for getting in a port for their stuff. Their stuff's on a ship just waiting to get in a port.
Yeah. Well, we're in a tough spot in some ways because, for example, our flat cars were coming up on needing to order some outside supplies, say KD couplers and metal wheel sets and weights and things like that. We're looking at getting supplies that we're not making ourselves because we're basically building stuff in the U.S. I'm trying to avoid China, but even so, we've had supply problems for the metal wheel sets. We've had, when the lockdown started, KD, can we please get some OEM coupler, parts? Oh, wait, you're closed. Oops. Uh-oh. So that's the kind of supply train stuff that I'm saying is messed up right now, where, some of the companies are reopening at limited abilities, and I need to go track down some more of that again. But that's, even saying, well, we're going to make it in the US, we're not going to have the international problems, but we're still being affected even from the other companies that are bringing wheels in from China and things like that.
Yeah, I had a laptop that went belly up, I had in-home warranty repair come a couple times, fix it. It broke again. And so I was talking to Lenovo, and they're like, well, why don't you just send it in for warranty? You know, we'll have it back in 5 days. Okay. That thing has been sitting there now for almost 2 months. And it's because of supply issues for parts. So then I got frustrated and I ordered a brand new Dell Alienware laptop, and they're like, oh, we'll have it delivered on December 4th. It just got in yesterday. So it's like, it's not just the hobby. There's logistical nightmares.
Oh yeah.
And I hope it eases soon, because it's, I mean, people can't get, we were looking at buying a house, and I talked about renovating a house instead of buying one turnkey, because they're getting snatched up and there's competition everywhere. And you can't get refrigerators in some cases. You can't get ovens in some cases. You can't get stoves or sinks. So it's just crazy, and I hope it goes away soon. I wish your company all the best too. You'll have to send me information, and maybe we can do like a product demo or something to get your name out there on my channel too, because I wasn't aware.
Yeah, absolutely. We're happy to help out, and
and with small companies, I have a very firm stance. There's no giving anything. I buy the item. I want to support the company and then do the video. So I just want to see what you got available, and I'll order some stuff.
Yeah, we're basically doing HO, mostly Western roads right now. We're trying to get some new products lined up, but right now right now I'm starting to just reach for shorter turn projects where we can get things back out and keep enough money coming in the door that we can stay open. You know, things are challenging right now in that way. That's why I'm a little bit concerned about the pouring a bunch of money into a project that'll take 3 to 6 months to see returns on right now. You know, if I put a major chunk of tooling money into that I could spend on something that would be a 2-month turn or a 1-month turn, I try to not be short-sighted that way. But when I start looking at these projects that start getting into, 6 months, a year, possibly, it's like, ooh, that's going to be a challenge. And especially with the COVID stuff, we were expecting to have a faster turn this year on resupplying our other parts. And as things have drug on, you're sitting there going, well, we're going to have to reorder this and we're going to have to reorder that. And now we're getting strung out far enough that, people aren't ordering things. Now we're not going to be able to have the money to restock, now it's going to be a question of, do we restock this or do we restock that? And that's going to be painful when we start running out of actual stock in house.
Yeah, it's a struggle. Small business scares the crap out of me. I have a couple business degrees. I've got a lot of business acumen. The risk scares the pants off. I just can't do it. So my hat's off to you for doing what you do, and I'll help in any way I can. I was telling John, sometimes it's a big impact, sometimes it's just a trickle, but it's important to not forget we get so centralized around the major manufacturers, completely forget about everything else going on.
To answer street fighting and
fighting man.
Yeah, street fighting man. We're mostly like the flat car in the image there. We're doing about 1910, 1916 up through, let's see, those cars went out of service in the 60s. So that's kind of the era that I'm primarily I'm an HO modeler by good grief, 35 years in the hobby. And I settled onto the early 1950s Southern Pacific as my prototype modeling interest. And I've been a member at La Mesa Club in San Diego for 20-something years. And so some of our projects have basically been, hey, the club could easily use 100 of these and they're not made. Let's try to solve that. So that's one of the things that we've been working on.
I think we should mention too, Jason, that if anybody's interested in seeing some of your models and your weathering and all that, we have videos on this channel. Search for Owl Mountain Models or Jason Hill.
Or my name, they'll pop right up.
Yeah, and they'll pop right up on there. You can see who Jason is and what he does. I think one of the last model builds I did with Dan before he quit here was your flat car, wasn't it?
Yeah, it
Jason?
was
Yeah.
5-part. And I've also on my channel, Night Owl Modeler on YouTube, I've also done a build video on that kit as well.
Very cool.
I didn't get into painting and weathering and stuff necessarily in that video. It was more just the technical aspects of building the kit and what I was thinking when I designed it. And so people can, it's a supplement to the instructions. The instructions are pretty good. They're 8 pages long, but it's one of these things of, by the way, here's the technique of how you install this particular detail part.
Right. Cool.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, thanks for calling in, though. I do appreciate that. Was there anything else, Jason, that you wanted to say before we go? Because we're coming up to the end here pretty soon.
Yeah,
So.
no problem. I was just going to say on a personal note, and our followers of the business and so forth have been seeing it in our newsletters and stuff. About 2 years ago, my partner in the business in the family had a stroke, and so that's been really hard, dropping from a 2-person business to a 1-person business and doing caregiving. So I went from working full time basically to working now like 20% time, and so stack that on top of COVID, and it's like, whew, okay, this is really not fun. So we're fighting to keep going here, but as they say, we can always use any support we can get from the rest of the community to keep us in action here. We love to support all of our customers. We consider you guys family.
Cool. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
You take care.
Yes, sir. Thanks.
Thanks.
Cool. Yeah. If Jason gets in touch with me later, I'm assuming that's okay then to give him your contact, James. Cool.
Yeah, that's fine. I gotta focus on helping small businesses more, and it just gets lost in the sauce, you know.
Sure. Well, I mean, there are a lot of people doing a lot of things, and there are people doing 3D printing and putting their stuff up that way too. So it's hard, because you can't be everything to everyone, but we'll do as much as we can. And you were going to say something?
I was just going to say, I think if we can get a show or something together, that'll help too. So maybe we'll work on that over the next few months and kind of end the modeling season, if you will, where it's starting to come into the spring with all of these small companies. So maybe we can work on that together.
Right. Yeah, and I could host it on this thing if people want to do something live where they call in and show us what they have or what they're selling or whatever. I mean, I could tell you how to do it on yours. This program that I use is very easy to use. So
yeah, I've used StreamYard actually when I interviewed Athearn.
Oh, okay.
I figured that out finally.
Yeah, I apologize. I haven't had a chance to watch all the videos that you put out. I don't really get to watch many videos because I'm always working. You're right. I'm always working on my own, so I don't get to watch most people's stuff, or else I probably would have known you used StreamYard. I do want to thank Sparky and James and Manny. They've all put little super chat things on here. Sparky's trying to get us to go for another 2 hours and 12 minutes to break the record that I set with him. That was 4-something hours long. That isn't going to happen tonight. Dave, sorry. I mean, what's that?
Don't want me to starve to death.
Yeah, we didn't even eat our dinner here yet. So we'll be going pretty much on time here pretty soon. Do you have time for another? I got a couple of questions that I thought were kind of cool if you have time, James. Otherwise, we can cut it here in a minute.
Yeah, I thought he meant 2 hours and 15 minutes total. I'm like, that's easy. Let's break this thing.
Yeah. Oh, no. We went for 4 hours and 3 minutes or something like that. And
oh, Lord. Nope.
Yeah, the ironic thing about that show was one of us called the other or sent a text message just saying, oh, it was Dave. He wanted to test his hardwired internet that he had just installed.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, hey, can you help me test this? I'm like, sure, let's just go live for a minute and see if it works. And we went live and we came on and we're like, yeah, we're just going to be here for a minute. And I think it might have been my first ever call-in show like this. Mm-hmm. And we just had people calling for the next 4+ hours. And by the time it was over, it was kind of cool because I did not realize we'd been on. It was having such a great time. But I could feel it, when you've been talking for a long time. Like you get that at I get that at train shows where I'm talking to people for hours and hours. And I just looked up at the clock and like, I can't believe we just did that. We were only going to be on for a couple minutes.
Yep.
That was the plan anyway. So do you want to do a couple more questions or do you want to call it?
No, it's fine. Go ahead.
Okay. So Anthony Borden wants to know if European model makers or model manufacturers are better. I thought that was kind of an interesting question. I don't know. I have an opinion about that, but it's not fully formed because I don't think I have enough information, to be honest.
So in the case of Roco, for example, Roco Fleischmann, they do some really good stuff and really neat, innovative things like the snow plow that turns 360 degrees. And so I think they can be a little more innovative. And then a few months ago, I reviewed the Markland Tricks Big Boy, which was,
I did watch that one.
Yeah, which was interesting because they took a lot of time to do details, but then somebody tells me, oh, the drivers are undersized. So, and I didn't even realize it. But they were, the drivers were undersized. So I think they struggle with the same thing that American manufacturers do, which is basically trying to catch all the detail. What do they miss? But I think they are a little more innovative in terms of like Roco Fleischmann and stuff. But we haven't seen, I hear the floodgates are going to open on innovation in the next couple of years in the hobby. So we'll see what they come up with.
Cool. That'll be interesting to watch.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm not going to add anything to that. I honestly don't have enough experience with European manufacturers. All I will say is that I would expect them to be very high quality because I know that most mechanical stuff that comes out of Germany or those European countries tends to be really good. So, I mean, just look at the cars. You have a BMW or something, the Bavarian Motor Works, right?
That thing has been in the shop. So I bought it about a year old and the warranty expired at like 5 years because it had an extended added for a year and it had $20,000 in warranty repairs.
Wow.
A period of about 2.5 years. It had so many different things go wrong.
But the question is though, when it's operating properly.
Oh yeah, it's great. I mean,
right.
But the quality's not there. I mean, I've got a 16-year-old Acura that's holding up better right now than my BMW that was, even after year one.
Well, think about that because Acura is a Japanese brand, isn't it? And think about Kato.
Mm-hmm. Katos are, they run like Swiss watches. So
yeah, that's their reputation. They may be a little light on detail at times, but that thing will run really well for a long time.
Yep.
One other person, and I'll make this our last question because I want to be respectful of your time here, James. And thanks for doing this, by the way. I knew this was going to happen. I felt like we started out kind of slow and not a lot of questions, not a lot of people calling in. Usually by about an hour into these things, it starts cooking. And then before you know it, it's over.
Mm-hmm.
So Clinton wants to know, do you think sound decoders are overpriced?
Sound decoders by themselves, I think it's just a better deal to get it in a locomotive, right? So you can get an Athearn Genesis DC only for like, when you do the cost difference, the street price difference, it's like $60-$70 sometimes difference versus buying them outright. I don't know if they're overpriced considering what all goes into them. And see, I know too much about the background because I visited Soundtracks and I've talked with ESU and, there's just a lot of parts and it's hard to tell, how do you put a value on, hey, this person has to run up and to the other side of the country and record a locomotive for 2 days. And then this person has to test everything. And this person has to encode, do computer code. And, it's very hard to tell. So I would say no, but again, everybody's budget's different. There's people out there saying, oh, decoders are cheap. And some people out there saying, I've got to save for 2 months to get a decoder. So I try to stay out of that realm too much, but there's just a lot of parts that you have to consider to get the cost. Yeah,
there's a lot of, that's one of the things that I think is lost on a lot of consumers and a lot of hobbyists is how much goes into these things. I mean, I've talked to manufacturers and you're just like, why don't you do this model? And they say the tooling costs, and it's in the tens of thousands for rolling stock.
Mhm.
I can only imagine what it must be for when you start getting into locomotives, right?
Some of them are multiple six figures in the locomotives. They're approaching or surpassing $200,000.
Right. And if you think about that, how many models do they have to sell before they get it? But that's not the point. The point is it's an initial outlay. You have to put that money out before you get anything back. So it's hard to, and then if it flops now, like Jason was talking about, if what happens? That could mean that you have to shut down or you're not going to eat for 6 months, which means you'd shut down anyway because you'll starve to death. So
yeah, and I don't want to be that guy that says, "Oh, this is the model we're going to make." It's easy to go to the train show and be like, "Hey, man, I want this," but when it's your butt on the line.
Yep. Yeah, I wouldn't want that job. I mean, I think there's a lot of people who fantasize about that job thinking, well, it's cool because I'll get it. But you know what? It's just not that simple.
No.
You can make what you want if you work for those companies or make what you think you want. But at the end of the day, if it doesn't sell, it's not good business.
And looking back, you can be as amazed with a model as you want. Eventually that thrill wears off. I was dying to get UP auxiliary tenders for years in the hobby. And when Scale Trains finally produced them, after, everybody was saying that they needed to be done, I was fascinated. I'll still use them when I run my excursion stuff, but it's in the rearview mirror and I'm on to like, man, I really want a coal turbine, So, and then Scale Trains, they'll tell you, I think pretty publicly, that they didn't sell as fast as they thought they would. They're like, they were expecting a pretty quick sellout because, they had an idea of how many UP excursion modelers were out there and they didn't move. So they started getting worried, like, man, did we do a wrong thing after everybody said we needed to do this?
Right.
They finally sold out of their run and did a second run, a lighter second run. So, it worked out, but I'm not all about those now. I'm on to the next greatest thing, just like anybody is.
Yeah. And I guess people don't think about the risk. That's really what it boils down to. So,
right.
Anyway, I got a couple announcements I want to make and then we'll get out of here. I just wanted to mention that there's a video tomorrow that's a product spotlight that Western Pacific fans may be interested in seeing. And then this weekend, there's a layout tour. That's the Sierra in 1923. It's an HO scale layout tour that I shot a couple months ago. It's a really good layout, and there's a lot of history involved also. So it's kind of like one part history lesson and one part model railroad. It's a very cool video. And we're going to go live again on December 27th. That's the day after, or 2 days after Christmas, rather, with the, with the TSG Crew Lounge. We're going to be talking about, is this month modular? I don't have it written down. Yeah, we're going to be talking about modular railroading. So that ought to be fun. And I should mention, I'm guessing that most of the people that watch my channel know who you are, James, but you can find James if you just go to JLWII2000 or search for that on YouTube. I'm guessing that we probably have a lot of crossover with our subscribers. Your channel's still bigger, but so you have about 15,000 more people watching than I do. But, whatever. Like you said, it's all going to even out eventually.
It will, and I'm not the popular one in the group of two of us because I don't have any things on cable access TV and some of the rural states on RFD TV, and I don't do nearly the editing you do. So
you've seen those?
Dude, I used to watch them. In Nebraska, I would be like, "Oh, RFD TV, what's this? What TSG Multimedia? Oh my gosh, I've talked to a big time producer."
Big time producer, yeah, right.
But yeah, they play your stuff, and it's really good. I mean, you know all of the stuff, like we were just talking about the rule of thirds. I've heard of it. I never give a crap about it to put it in my videos. I just fire from the hip, expecting an expensive camera to do the work, but you've got to do a lot of, you've done all the photography research, the videography research, the video editing, so you're more quality. And I am happy to, the day when you surpass me in subscribers. I think that day's coming, and I'm happy to say, hey, John, you're now the big cat, because you deserve it. You put that much effort into it.
Well, I've just been doing video for a long time, James, and
Yep.
I do work hard at it. So thank you for the. Well, now you're going to make me blush. Look, I'm turning red. Thanks for the compliments in any case. And thank you very much for agreeing to do this. I had a lot of fun. I hope you had fun. I hope that maybe we can do it again sometime. I'm planning to do these call-in shows with a guest co-host like you or Michelle last month. Next month, we have a guest lined up right now, but we're not entirely sure it's going to happen. So I don't want to talk about it yet. Hopefully, if you're around, you can call in and say hi to everybody. And
hopefully Rod Stewart makes it for you. I know he's got a busy schedule.
Oh, right. Yeah. No, I think actually Drew Warrington, Nordell, I think you've talked to him, haven't you?
Yeah.
The young guy from back east, I think he's the one who's going to get Rod Stewart first, because he asks everybody and he's very persistent from my understanding. He emailed me. I'm just like, yeah, okay. I didn't even make him work for it,
Yeah.
So.
He must not like me. He didn't email me, but I think I talked to him on Train World, or maybe not. I might not have talked to him. I don't know.
I thought he interviewed you.
I don't think so. No.
Oh, well, you'll probably be hearing from him soon, because he watches my channel and he'll probably want to talk to you now.
Yeah.
Anyway, thanks, James. I appreciate that. I'm going to put you back down in the basement, as we call it. And if you can hang out for about 30 seconds or a minute or so, I'll come back and talk to you for just a second. All right.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. All right, everybody. Thanks for watching. I really do appreciate it. And I'm going to remove myself now and play a little something, and it gives everybody a chance to say goodbye in the chat room. And thanks again. I'll talk to you soon.